Hello, I'm Barbara Archer, a partner with Hightower Wealth Advisors St. Louis. With our varied skills, resources, and experience, our ensemble of wealth advisors help you make a plan, make an investment, make a difference. Today we begin a three-part series to help frame expectations and prepare for college admissions. Part 1, how to be an attractive candidate. So Andy, thank you for joining me to answer some questions we have from our clients, their children, and their friends as they move through what sometimes feels like an overwhelming endeavor. You and I have been through this decades ago, and then as parents with our own children, a lot has changed. So why is getting into selective colleges even harder than it's ever been?
Well, first of all, Barbara, thank you to you and to Hightower for having me. A quick anecdote at the beginning, I was doing work for Princeton many years ago, and a very prominent professor comes up to me and he says, "I can't believe how selective we've become." He had just gotten the statistics. Princeton was admitting just 13% of its applicants then. Well, Princeton is admitting just 5.5% of its applicants now, and it's the same basically everywhere. It has become harder and harder. And why is that? Well, first of all, there are 1 million more students now than there were in 2000. So that means many more applications. It's much easier to apply. You may remember a little device you and I presume, used to use in our day called a typewriter, and we type out the application. If there was a mistake, we'd use a whiteout, etc. Now there are some application portals that make the experience very seamless, and of course, no need for whiteout. They're called the Common Application and the Coalition Application. And also, there's a little something called the internet, which has really democratized the process. Because if you think back to the way it was, in at least, well, I shouldn't ask you. I'll say for me, if you think back, I think back, we had those massive Fisk or Peterson's guides that we'd lug around with information about colleges. Now you just go to the college website or other sources and find great information about schools. And that means that more and more students are out there are not having to spend $30 or $40 on a big, thick book. But, in 2 seconds, the world of colleges is theirs via the internet. So there are a lot of things making a difference. Kids are taking no chances. Some are applying to 10 to 15 schools. We think 10, a good college balanced list is 10 schools.
Okay, great. So 10 schools. And what are some of the things that have changed in terms of what colleges are looking for today versus, let's say, 20 years ago?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. Years ago, colleges were looking for a well-rounded student. And by that, they meant students who were members of a number of clubs and at school and might have been, shortstop on the baseball team, but not a recruitable shortstop, might have a leadership position at one of those clubs. Now things have changed. They've almost, especially highly selective schools, gone the other way. Now schools are looking for a well-rounded class made up of individual students who really excel at one or two things. So they're looking for great mathematicians, great debaters, people who do extraordinary things in community service, terrific actors, people with special stories that really stand out. They're really looking, in essence, for a good story. What is your story? What is it that differentiates you, that distinguishes you? And we're going to get into extracurriculars, I know, in a minute, because it's just so important these days for students to find that one thing or two things that really set them apart from the pack.
So Andy,
Yeah.
When you say that, when you work with a student, what's the ideal time for you to begin working with students
Yeah, that's a
so that
great
you can
question.
help them prepare for the future and their application process? I'm thinking 5 years old's a little early,
Uh,
but
6 is good.
okay.
No, I would say ninth grade, 10th
Okay.
grade. I shouldn't say at the latest. We work with a lot of juniors who start with us. But one of the joys of being a college counselor is that you can really work with students to help find outlets for their passions, to nurture their passions, to cultivate their passions, to help them gain leadership positions, to find great summer programs for them, to find things to engage their brain and their enthusiasm and their passion. And the sooner that we're able to do that, like a sculptor a little bit, and sort of shape the clay, if you will,
Sure.
I think the more advantageous it ultimately will be for those students. So starting, as I say, 9th, 10th grade is the best time.
So as you're molding these young students,
Yeah.
what are some of the most important factors that a college evaluates so that you can help them get them on the right path early?
Well, I think it is that story. It is, what is it that makes you different? And colleges are looking for students who have been committed to something for a long period of time, not Johnny-come-latelys. They're not looking for just members of 10 clubs and people who do nothing in those clubs. They're looking for students with leadership positions, students who show initiative. And, you know, I tell the story of, or create the hypothetical of, you know, out in St. Louis, you have Ladue High School, you have Burroughs, you have Clayton. And let's say that I'm a Vanderbilt admissions officer and I'm looking at 2 terrific kids from each one of these schools, and I can only take one. And each of these kids has similar GPAs, and each of these kids similar board scores. And then I say to myself, pick Vanderbilt, what else have you got for me? What have you done in your 4 years of high school that's a predictor of how you can contribute to our campus once you get here? We know you can do the work, but how have you displayed your passion, your fascination, your commitment? And the interesting thing is, there's no defined club activity thing you need to pursue. It's anything. Show us something that's interesting. I've had kids who've gone on Shark Tank with who found with a young lady who was throwing a lacrosse ball against her garage and it was coming out unevenly. She was a lacrosse player, and she said, why don't I go out and develop a piece of equipment that will allow that lacrosse ball to come back evenly so that I can practice effectively? I've had students, and colleges love it when kids show initiative, who've begun citizenship classes for immigrants in their native tongue. I've had students one amazing girl who was head of her own marine biology club and started a marine biology club down the street at a high school that couldn't afford extracurricular activities. So you don't need to cure cancer. It wouldn't be bad, but you don't need to solve world hunger, right? You need to make an impact, or it's valuable to make an impact in your community. Look around, find identifiable problems, issues, things you can do. I have another kid, a STEM kid, terrific kid, who started this little club, which is in fact now grown to serve 200 disadvantaged students in his community, where he and a few other students from his high school go out and teach coding to those kids who otherwise would not have that opportunity. That is something where you are sharing your passion, your intellectual passion, with students or with others outside the four walls of your school. So those are some examples.
Okay, well, Andy, I have a question about that, because I've had parents say to me, how does their child differentiate themselves? Do they go deep into an activity? Do they go wide and have music and sports and engineering classes? What is it they can do to make themselves stand out when that college admissions director looks at their resume?
Well, as I said, to a certain extent at highly selective schools, I think those schools are looking for a specific kind of story. Now, does that mean if you're a great debater and you also happen to be, a terrific linebacker, that's going to cost you? Of course not. If you also play the oboe on top of that, that's fabulous. They want a student who is not necessarily limited, who has only one interest, but they would like to see a student who excels in at least one thing. And it doesn't matter what it is, but what is your story and what are you doing to advance that story? I have a student, for example, who's fascinated by neuroscience. We got her into this fabulous program last summer where she was paired with a professor at Hamilton College, and she got to do this amazing project studying whether the limbs of amputees could be stimulated electrically. And so she is continuing to build her neuroscience story with another research project this summer through another research service and by working in a hospital. So it's a question of, if I'm a college admissions officer and I'm reading your application, saying, I get it. This is not the only thing this young lady does, by the way. She competes in quiz bowls and works at the library and does all sorts of wonderful things. But the essence, the selling point is, I think, for her anyway, this amazing work she's done in neuroscience.
Thank you. Now the hard part. I'm so glad that you're an award-winning TV journalist, because I'm sure you're a great helper with your students that you work with, because writing that college essay, yikes. Yeah. What's the best advice you can give a student as they sit down to write?
Be yourself. Don't try to write, first of all, in formal terms with big, fat $50 words to impress the admissions officer who's reading your application. Be authentic, write in your voice. And tell them something about you that they either don't know or want to know more of. And there's so many interesting prompts now that are asked by the Common Application or the Coalition application, from what challenges have you overcome, to what is something that kind of keeps you up awake at night and that you're so fascinated by, to what is your specific identity by race or background or love of cuisine or something else. And there's so many opportunities for you within 7 prompts to find something that's meaningful. You can even create your own question. But however you do it, make it you, because this is the opportunity for a college to really meet you as a human being a flesh and blood human being for the first and only time in your application process, unless you do an interview. And to be frank, for the most part, those aren't very meaningful. For a few schools, they do. So extend your hand to them and say, hey, this is why you should take me, but do it with authenticity, do it with humor, do it however you want to do it, but make it you.
Thank you. Last question for this part of our series. We have 3 parts. We have a lot to cover. So the last bit of guidance I'd like to get from you today is, how do you come up with a balanced college list?
Yeah, we as I think I said at the beginning, emphasize that a balanced college list should consist of usually 10 colleges. And the way we sort of break it up is to say you should have 3 or 4 dream schools on there, reach schools. 3 or 4, I'm in the conversation schools where, you have a reasonable shot of getting in, and 2 or 3 schools where you should get in. And coming up with those schools is something that we work with our students on all the time through a series of questions. I mean, where do you want to go to college? Do you want to go in the Midwest where you are, Barbara? Do you want to go to the Southeast, to the Southwest, to the Northeast? Do you want to go to a big university, a big public university where you might be in a class in a non-COVID world of 500 students? And how does that feel to you? How will learning in that capacity feel to you? Would you rather be in a small liberal arts college where you'd be in a classroom of 20 students? So does being on ESPN every Saturday mean something to you? Do you want to be at a rah-rah school? Do you want to be one of the Cameron Crazies at Duke? All of these things, help to create a sense of where one might want to go to school. Of course, the most important thing and the deal breaker in all of this is the major. You got to make sure that the school offers the major you're interested in, because after that, if it doesn't, no matter how wonderful it is, it's not going to be the right fit for you.
Well, thank you. So setting a major, it was not necessarily what our parents told us we had to do when we first went to school, right? When we were in school, and now today it's more important to set that major up front.
Well, yeah, because not only for you, but for the school, because you check a box on the common application that says, I want to major in biology, I want to major in communications, I want to major in business. So they want to know what they're getting. Because if you've got a college of 1,500 freshmen, they need to know that there's a proportionate sort of distribution of majors that they're admitting. They can't admit 1,000 communications kids, right?
Sure.
So it's very important for you to have a sense of that. Now, 60% of students in America will change their major. So most colleges are pretty flexible about that. And sometimes you need to be a little strategic about the major you choose. Perhaps, Greek and Latin, which is maybe not as popular as business or biology these days. But schools still need to pay their classics professors. So they need kids for those professors to teach. I'm not saying be disingenuous about the major you choose, but be strategic about it. How's that?
Very good. Well, thank you, Andy. We do appreciate you sharing your time and your guidance, and we look forward to our second part, where you are going to give us some more information on standardized testing in the new COVID world. And so thank you for joining us. And I am Barbara Archer with Hightower Wealth Advisors, St. Louis, where we help you make a plan, make an investment, make a difference. So now let's all go make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.